Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we've got a early impression video on a decant. Again, sent to me by Nick. I've been really enjoying going through these thick decants that Nick sent me. So thank you, Nick, for supplying me with some juice of a fragrance I otherwise would never be able to smell. And this is one of the two-headed monsters, amber fragrances from the house of Profumum Roma. I must admit, Profumum Roma is a house that I have really enjoyed as of late. I actually did a video on the world famous Profumum Roma's Patchouli, which came out in 2004, same year as Fiore Ambre, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So again, this is Fiore Ambre, which literally translates to flowers in amber in Italian, or something like that. Flower amber, flowers in amber, however you want to take it. So we'll talk a little bit about this, and it's a house I've really fallen in love with late. If you've seen one Profumum Roma bottle, you've pretty much seen them all. Again, I have to say thank you to Jeff for sending me this. A friend in the community very kindly sent me this full bottle. It was actually still sealed. This one was made in 2010, and this one's called Arso. And man, I'm going to review this one day soon because I am in love with this fragrance. It is so good. It might be their best, but I haven't smelled enough of their fragrances to claim it's the best of everything, but I think it's my favorite from all that I've smelled so far. But this is a little gem. And so there's actually two ambers that are extremely popular from the house of Profumum Roma. One is Ambra Aurea, and I know the comments are going to be, how does this compare to Ambra Aurea? I don't know. That's the thing, is I've never smelled Ambra Aurea. I think I might have a couple drops somewhere up here in my little decant graveyard, but I have not had a chance to smell it yet. But this one, I had significantly more juice thanks to the generosity of Nick. So I've worn this to bed one day previously, and I am wearing it as my scent of the day today, which on July 30th in Texas is a risky proposition. But I'll tell you what, the heat actually brings out even more beautiful smells from the amber. It's almost like it comes alive in the heat. And so many people consider this to be a winter fragrance, and I would agree. I think most ambers are saved for fall and winter because they have this unbelievable warmth about them. You know, I always think about giving someone a hug. You know, it's almost like being in the arms of somebody that you love, you know, being safe in their arms and feeling their body heat against yours, right? That's what a good amber fragrance does. But I have to say, it was 103 degrees here in Texas today, and this actually smelled amazing in the heat. At least to me it did. I think it did. I think it does. But give these type of ambery fragrances a try in the heat. Don't only keep them for the winter. I think they're mostly used for the winter, but I think this could be a really versatile amber scent. So let's talk a little bit about it. So I did a video, like I said, on Patchouli from the house of Profumum Roma. And one thing that I said in that video, and actually it's also true when it comes to Arso, is that Profumum Roma's fragrances in general are extremely linear. And so whenever you spray their fragrances, pretty much what you're going to get from the beginning of the scent is what you're going to get to the end. But it's not exactly linear, but there is a little bit of what I would call almost like a little bit of a wiggle, okay? So it doesn't go into this huge transition where it starts here and ends here and goes all over the place. It just has a little bit of a wiggle. Like if you drew a line, you know, maybe there's like a little bit of a murmur going throughout the center of it. It moves a little bit here and a little bit there, but you know, it doesn't go all over the place like a huge transition. And that's how this one is as well. I think that's just the DNA of the house, if you will. And so, interestingly enough, this was created in the exact same year as Patchouli from 2004 was a big creative year for the house of Profumum Roma. And there's actually 3 notes to this fragrance, and only 3 that's listed. According to Parfumo, excuse me. According to Parfumo, there's 3 notes. One is amber, go figure. One is spices, and the other one is the Fiore part of the name, which is the flower, and that is opium poppy. Now, very interesting, and we'll talk a little bit about that because I have a lot of floral fragrances in my collection. I have a lot of fragrances that use many different florals, but I have very rarely come across a fragrance that uses opium poppy. As a note, there is some rumor that the original Opium by YSL did have an opium poppy note in it. I don't know if that's true or not. It's not in the note listing when you look on Parfumo or anything like that, but there is a rumor that Opium did have an opium poppy flower note in there as well. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that flower is supposed to be like. But interestingly enough, this is considered a spicy oriental fragrance. So if you like those old school spicy orientals from the past, think of things like Shalimar, or think of things like Tabu by Dana. This is a fantastic under the radar oriental as well. You know, think of things, if you want to fast forward a little bit, this is actually a really good comparison to Fiore d'Ambre. This is Obsession, the Calvin Klein mega hit from the 80s. This is the for men version. The for women's version, excuse me, is actually very close though. You could go either or and make the comparison, but there is something that in the base just turns a little bit of this, you know, musky amberiness as it continues to dry. That's a little bit of the wiggle that you get in Fiore d'Ambre. But this is a really good comparison. And if you really like this scent DNA, I would urge you to try to find the vintage with the built-in sprayer and the one that is cologne spray for men right here, not the EDT. This is on another planet. This is so good. And if I, you know, since my collection is so extensive and you can't own everything, I would probably say that Obsession for Men, this bottle right here, the vintage bottle, is probably the only thing that would stop me from trying to procure a bottle of this, because 100 mils of Fiore d'Ambre, I know I've said it both ways now. Is it Fiore or Fiore? My Italian is not what it should be, but Profumum Roma's Fiore d'Ambre is 265 euros for 100 mils. So it's not insane pricing. You know, Rojas are double that, let's say, but it's not cheap either. So here's the little blurb from basically amber flower is what it translates to, let's say. And it says, a candle spreads the smell of opium and amber, a nobly unmade bed, and my book on the bedside table. In my mind, the thought of her. Okay, so there's very short little descriptions on their website, and it doesn't really give you that much. And what it does give you is extremely vague, but the candle imagery is actually really important in this one, because the candle has that flame, right? And it has that waxiness to it. So you have that waxy and the fire, the flame. So remember earlier I said, imagine giving somebody a hug, and imagine it's cold out, and imagine the person you're hugging has this wool-like sweater and there's this warmth, right? Or even if it's like skin to skin, you get the warmth of the body of the person that you're hugging, right? There's a little bit of that candle flame warmth to the fragrance. Actually, there's a lot of it, because it's a very well done amber fragrance. But interestingly enough, one thing that you will notice from the very get-go of this fragrance, and it's really what one of the calling cards of this house, I would say, is whenever you spray a Profumum Roma fragrance, all the ones that I've smelled so far, and I've only smelled a handful, so to be fair, I'm not claiming to be some sort of an expert, but every single one that I've smelled comes across as almost like you're smelling a vintage fragrance. That's how it smells, because the concentration of the fragrances, it's almost so oily that you could almost like rub it in to your skin whenever you spray. And they last forever on me. I mean, they don't, like I said, they don't change much. They just have a little bit of that wiggle, but they last forever on my skin. So this is easily a 10-hour fragrance. I saw some comments on other videos where some people were saying this one doesn't last as long, and I have no clue what they're talking about. I have yet to smell a Profumum Roma fragrance that doesn't last forever. Just beast mode type scents. But they don't have that disgusting amber wood thing that puts some people off as modern beast mode scents. These are scents that last a long time, but they feel more like a vintage fragrance. So if you've ever smelled, I mentioned Obsession earlier, I mentioned Opium, I mentioned Dana. If you've ever smelled this is Krizia's Teatro alla Scala. This is technically a Chypre, but it has these oriental ambery vibes to it. There's a beeswax note in here. One of my favorite feminine fragrances of all time. I mean, I just held up a couple of my favorite feminine fragrances with Opium, but Teatro alla Scala has a little bit of this ambery character to it. Now, this is much dirtier. This is really a textbook case in Animalics used inside of a sheep recreation. You know, this will, if you're a fragrance lover and you've never smelled Teatro alla Scala, this will knock you out of your chair. I mean, go watch my early impression video of this if you want to see what an impact this had on my... I ended up buying like 4 bottles of this stuff because I never want to be without it. It's that good. But just that sort of, you know, amberiness in the base, but the vintage style, the heavy hitter. You know, Teatro alla Scala is referencing an opera house. And so imagine literally the fat lady singing at the top of her voice and holding that note long and loud. And that's how many of those vintage fragrances come across. And I like that. I like the power of the old vintage perfumes. And many of the modern niche fragrances have lost that. But the house of Profumum Roma has not. They're a house that has really sort of hung on to that vintage style of creation in fragrances. So, like I said, I can't wait to smell the other amber from this house, but I can tell you just right out of the gate, just sort of me talking out loud, kicking the shit with you guys, this is one of the best amber fragrances I've smelled, period. I mean, it's up there with my favorite ambers, hands down. I did a ranked amber video if you want to go check that out. So this is not a top 10 amber fragrances, but this is fantastic stuff. This is very high quality. I really have enjoyed wearing it today. And it is interesting to me, just again, since I usually have this very conversational tone, and sometimes I just think of something and say something and kind of just ramble all over the place about my thoughts. But it is interesting to me that Opium is literally one of the greatest selling Oriental fragrances of all time. And this is a fragrance that is meant to be sort of a spicy Oriental. And the flower that they chose for Fiore d'Ambre, or amber flower, is opium. It's opium poppy. And so I'll give you a couple facts that that I sort of did some research on when it comes to the opium flower. So opium poppies have been used for thousands of years. Humans have been cultivating them for their medicinal purposes for, you know, centuries, millennia. And they are actually, believe it or not, they are one of the oldest cultivated flowers in the world, period. Because, of course, they, many of the opiates that are cultivated come from the opium poppy. And they're a highly fragrant flower. In fact, they're usually most fragrant, I think, in the mornings is when the poppy fields are sort of most fragrant. But they're known to have this very sweet, almost floral scent that comes across as being slightly earthy and slightly spicy. All right, and most important, at least to me, to my sense of smelling this fragrance, oh, it's so good, is the most important thing about the opium poppy flower being used in this composition is it gives off a tint of an almond, or almost like a vanillic almond. Have you ever had a Jordan almond? The almonds that are like dipped in that hard sort of candy, they give them out at weddings and stuff like that. Have you ever had the one that's like dipped in like this the white vanilla coating or whatever? Think of that. Think of the almond and the vanilla coating, and then blend it with this amber that you have in your mind. Because, you know, whenever you think of an amber composition, you have to remember that amber in fragrances is not like some sort of a, you know, it's not something that they can just distill. They can't just distill amber. Well, normally they can't. There are some people that say that they can, but many people think that whenever modern ambers that you're going to smell are going to be some sort of an accord, an amber accord, if you will. It's an accord that the perfumer creates by putting together this group of notes. And normally that group of notes is going to include things like cistus, labdanum, tolu balsam, benzoin, vanilla, sometimes myrrh, apopanax, sometimes Peru balsam, you know, stuff like that. These resins and balsams, and they're going to create this amber smell. And many of my, like for example, my favorite ambers, like stuff like this, Ambre Sultan, they're going to be created using an accord. I have a very good sized decant of Ambre Precieux by Maitre Parfumé Agantier. I know my good friend Rich Mitch is really getting into that house. I haven't smelled anything else from that house except for Ambre Precieux, I believe. So that's a house I need to dive into at some point in time. But, you know, those are legendary ambers. Ambre Precieux, Ambre Sultan, Tom Ford's Amber Absolute. Go watch my ranked amber video if you want to kind of get a feel for my all-time favorites. But, you know, this is in that category, obviously. It's an amber. And so you're going to sort of know what to expect with an amber. But the thing about this fragrance that you're going to notice, like I said, is it really comes out swinging. It comes out no holds barred. It's not warming up. It's coming straight out of the gate swinging. And as soon as it hits your skin, you're going to realize the power. This is a powerful fragrance. And so it's this, really, it's exactly what the name says. It's amber and flowers. And the flower is that sweet, semi-sweet sort of opium poppy flower, slightly spicy. There's probably some extra spices in here to add to the mix, whether it's nutmeg or I can't pretend to know what spices they use, but it smells like maybe there's a little bit of, you know, nutmeg, maybe even just a little bit of clove or something like that to add, you know, a little bit of cinnamon, a little bit of clove, a little bit of nutmeg is my guess. I don't know what else is in here. I can't pretend to know because, like I said, I'm not a perfumer. I'm just a guy that really likes perfume. And so, one thing that I will tell you, though, is the amber texture comes across as almost putty-like, okay? So it has this Play-Doh, putty, ambery, thick, resinous, you know, imagine the wax dripping off of the candle and then hardening. And then imagine that wax is like the amber resin that you're smelling off of the tree. And that's kind of the way that the fragrance feels in texture. It has this deep vintage thickness to it that is missing in many modern fragrances. Now, this is not really a modern fragrance because, I mean, it came out 19 years ago, but I wouldn't consider it a vintage fragrance because it's after the year 2000. But it's sort of one of those fragrances that walks the line, but I wouldn't call it a vintage fragrance, but it smells like a vintage fragrance. That's the biggest thing. The amber is putty-like, and one thing I will say, though, and I kept waiting for some of this to come out and never did. I don't think there's really any, if there's any, it's the tiniest drop of Animalics in here. This is a fairly clean amber. And from my taste and my experience, and if you know me and you know the things that I like, you know I love things that are chocked full of Animalics. Think about something like Teatro alla Scala. The civet note in this will blow your mind. I mean, literally, it is a case study in how to use Animalics in a Chypre. Oh, and that beeswax honey thing in here, unbelievable. But you guys know I like to have that contrast. Animalics add that contrast to the fragrance. It also lifts the fragrance up. Sometimes fragrances can sort of weigh you down if they're too monotone or flatline, or, you know, just if they're even too clean. Sometimes I feel like it can sort of weigh you down. I like to have Animalics in my fragrances, and I was expecting a little bit of that to come out, and very little does. I mean, it's a very clean, you know, when I say clean amber, though, I feel like that almost misrepresents the fragrance, because there is a little bit of this there is a little bit of this spicy, funky undertone. This is also a really good representation for it, this Tabu, Dana's Tabu. It's almost like a niche version of Dana's Tabu. But, you know, think about this amber that has that putty-like sort of quality to it, and even without having the civet or castoreum or hyraceum or whatever it is underneath, I still love this fragrance. That's how good. It's just, it's almost like, you know, there's just a touch of something dirty underneath, undertow. Just a little beautiful flicker. And it's almost like, did I smell that? or did I imagine I smelled it, or did I actually smell it, or, you know, it's just like this beautiful amber glow. And like I said, normally I would complain about having this lack of animalics, but here the amber note is just so beautifully executed. It doesn't really say what they used. It just says, you know, amber, and then whatever spices you think that you might be able to smell. But I can tell you that I am extremely impressed with this house. This is a house that I definitely want to, you'll hear more of on my channel, I'll tell you that. There will be more reviews from the house of Profumum Roma, because even though their fragrances are, you know, they don't change very much, they're very linear, they're just so brilliantly done. And what they offer, you know, if you like the smell from the beginning, you're going to like it all the way throughout the fragrance, and they last forever. To the people that say they can't smell this sort of, for me, this buttery amber into the dry down, oh, this sort of, there's also a little bit of this creaminess to it. It's almost like a creamy amber. That's why I say clean isn't really a fair connotation to it. I just can't think of a better way to say it's an amber without having the deep animalic undertones that I love. I love it when there's big animalic undertones in my amber fragrances, but this is just so well executed. I would say this is a reference amber, and what's crazy is there's a ton of talk and a ton of videos on its sister fragrance, Ambra Aurea. There's almost no, I mean, there's a handful of videos on YouTube about it, but there's very little talk about this fragrance, and I think that that is a shame, because this is a fantastic amber. It is almost a reference amber. This could be like if you know, it's like trying to explain color to someone who is blind. How do you explain color to someone who's blind, right? How would you describe an amber fragrance to someone who's never smelled it before? Well, there's a couple examples that you could use. I mentioned Ambre Sultan earlier. I mentioned something like Opium, or even going all the way back to Shalimar. I don't think this has as much in common with Shalimar, but this could, Fiore d'Ambra could easily be one of those reference ambers. Like, okay, you want an example of what a proper amber fragrance should be? This is it. This is a great example. And for the men out there, don't let that flower part of it, because, you know, the name is literally amber flower. So don't let the flower part of it put you off. The opium poppy flower bit in here is unique. It's different. But it never goes full on floral. The amber is the star of the show here to me. Obviously, the opium poppy flower smell is a unique flower that you're not going to smell in many fragrances, but I would not stop. I think this would smell amazing on a man. It would smell amazing on a woman. It's completely unisex. It lasts 10 hours on my skin easily. You can see I've probably gone through about, I don't know, 2.5 mils of this stuff. So I've given it pretty good wear today, and I've really enjoyed it. So I do have to say again, thank you to Nick for being so generous and sharing your collection with me. Otherwise, there's no way I'd be able to do these type of videos. If you have experience with the house of Profumum Roma or this Fiore d'Ambra, this amber flower, I would love to hear your thoughts, because this is a house that, it's like snowball. It's like, at this point, it's a snowball. Every single one I've smelled is kind of, I'm loving, I'm smelling it, I'm enjoying it, and the snowball is growing as it's rolling downhill. And I want to smell more and more and more from this house. So, thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for watching my early impression. If you have more to add, love seeing your faces in the comments. Do leave a comment below. Thank you for the support. Hope to see your faces in the comments, and I am still at a point in the channel where I can respond to every single comment. So if you leave a comment, you will get a response from me. Appreciate the support. Cheers, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.